Hey, this is Mike from the Run Testers, and this is the new Hoka Tecton X3, a trail shoe or a version of the trail shoe that has been worn by the 2024 winners of the Western States 100 and the UTMB, two of the toughest ultra races going. Now, myself, Nick and Kieran have all had the Tecton X3 in to test, and what we're going to do in this video is let you know what's new from the Tecton X2, get into some general running thoughts using the Tecton X3, and then let you know whether you should be spending the big bucks on the Hoka Tecton X3. So this is your lowdown on a Hoka Tecton X3. So let's start with price, and the Tecton X3 price is a pretty hefty £220 in the UK or $275 in the US. That makes it more expensive than the likes of the Adidas Agravich Speed Ultra, the Nike Ultrafly, and around the same price as the new Asics Meta Fuji Trail. In terms of weight, our men's UK size 8 weighed in at 260 grams and does come in heavier than the Tecton X2. There's still a 5mm drop like the Tecton X2 with the same 40mm and 35mm stack height, and that's packed with a dual layer of Piba foam to give it serious bounce for your off-road runs. There's also a new dual carbon plate design with winglets to add propulsion and control over trails, and Hoka's Meta Rocket in place to give it all those key ingredients to pick up the pace in. Up top is a quick dry matrix upper and a vamp to keep things roomy in the toes, with that new gaiter style collar and tongue to keep trail debris out. The outsole is a Vibram Mega Grip light base one that has 4mm lugs compared to the 3mm ones on the X2, and that is to offer a boost in grip across a range of challenging and technical terrain. And if you're wondering what the difference is between the Tecton X3 and the shoe dubbed the Tecton X 2.5 that's been seen worn by Hoka athletes including Jim Walmsley and this year's UTMB winner Vincent Bulliard, the X 2.5 has a more aggressive design in terms of the carbon plate setup and also features a slightly different outsole compared to the one used on the X3.
Fit then, and I ran in a UK 8.5, which is my regular size in Hoka, though that does often feel quite snug. When I first saw this kind of booty style of this shoe, my heart sank a little bit. As someone with high insteps and fat, fairly wide feet, I don't tend to get on very well with booty shoes. And I'll be honest, I was dreading trying to get these on. But that was the first pleasant surprise with the Mac X3. The booty collar stretches nice and wide. There's actually quite a lot of room and flex across the top of the uppers, so they slid on really quite easily for a booty design. Though I do wish they had a heel pull heel, as well as kind of one on the top. Once they're on, I find the fit surprisingly good. I like the room in the toe box. I like the flex and wiggle room that comes with this kind of stretchy section, this kind of dynamic vamp. There's good hold across the top of the midfoot from these matrix uppers too, though I did find I wanted a little bit more support from the heel collars here. Just a bit more structure would have been nice and to offer us like a shade more security. But on the whole, these felt great on the foot. Kind of wide and roomy for a Hoka, and I would recommend going true to size.
So when it comes to the fit of the Hoka Tecton X3, I've got my normal Hoka size, which is a UK 9. It's a US 9.5. It does fit me pretty well, but I would say, as with the Speed Goat, I sometimes feel that I should go half a size up with Hoka's trail shoes compared to their road shoes, especially if you're running down hills. It can feel a little bit close to the toe box. And I think, actually, while it was okay on my longest run, my hilliest run in the shoe, I actually tightened the laces quite a lot, and I didn't get that kind of feeling of my toes hitting the front of the shoe too much. I have had it at other times. I think I could probably go on half a size up because it is a fairly dialed in upper in other ways, but I'm generally right on the fence between a US 9.5 and a US 10. So I think if you're in a similar situation, I'd probably go for the slightly larger size just so you have that extra space in the front. Otherwise, the fit's been really good for me. The gaiter, I didn't really need too much. I did do some running through long grass. Generally, I wasn't running on anything that was going to put too much debris into my shoe, like sand or grit or anything like that, but I like the fit of it. I kind of forgot it was there, but it also felt cozy at times. And given that when I first saw the shoe, I thought that's not going to be something I like, I actually did quite like it. So yeah, the gaiters I think is quite a nice touch to add to the shoe. And in general, the fit was pretty good for me on my normal size, but there's definitely a case for going half a size up potentially if you're right on the barrier between two sizes.
Now, in terms of fit, unsurprisingly, this is a tricky customer to get on your feet in the first place, but once I have managed to get it on, it's been a very good experience overall for me. I've got it in a UK size 8. That's my typical running shoe size. That's typically the shoe size that does work best for me in both of Hoka's kind of road and trail shoes. Now, like a lot of those shoes, it can feel a little bit on the narrow side. I think you kind of see it kind of does feel a little bit narrow further back in the shoe, but does open up quite naturally as you'd want to see in a kind of long distance kind of trail shoe and kind of when you get into the forefoot of the Tecton X3. Now, I've been very happy with the space up front in that toes, the kind of level of room you're getting here. Some might think it's a little bit on the snug side. For me, it's been fine. So there may be an argument to go or have a play around with going half a size up in here if you're worried that it's going to feel a little bit snug. But for me, it has been okay for me. Now, when you get back further into this shoe, obviously you've got this kind of all-in-one kind of gaiter kind of collar, but also that kind of extends into the tongue as well too. Generally, it's felt absolutely fine for me. The lockdown, I think I was a little bit concerned whether I'd get a good kind of lockdown with that kind of stretchy kind of gaiter there, but actually it's been generally fine for me. You do get some kind of internal kind of heel padding here where it doesn't seem obvious here. You do get some support there at the back of the shoe, and I haven't had any kind of issues in terms of heel rub, in terms of Achilles kind of irritation either as well. So for me, yeah, overall the experience has been very good. I was a little bit wary about a shoe that looks like this, but ultimately the fit has been good. My only thing I would probably say is if you do maybe prefer to have a little bit more room at the kind of front of your toes, then I think maybe it might be worth looking at going half a size up in the shoe, but ultimately going true to size will work best for me.
Now in testing, I've done a good mix of miles in the Hoka Tecton X3. A lot of that has been on more runnable rolling terrain that I have access to here in the UK, groomed, compacted paths, forest floors, fields and grassy meadows, that kind of trails that you can attack. Now I have a few miles of road to reach those trails too, so I've tested the tarmac credentials. I also had the chance to hit the trails in Chamonix for some testing on some steeper, stonier, some more rapid and technical kind of descents. So overall, I've logged around 25 miles in these shoes on a mix of terrain. Now I like the Tecton X2, slightly snappier speed goat with some pleasing similarity to the goat that made it easy to move between those two shoes. However, that also left us wondering if we really needed both of those shoes. They ran quite similar in most cases. For many runners, the cheaper speed goat was the better option. That is all changed now that you can see Hoka has put some clear distance between the goat and the Tecton, not just with this booty design and the very different silhouette, but the Tecton X3 is now softer, springier, bouncier, I think with less stability than the Speed Goat 6, but a whole lot more ride energy. It's fun smashing along the easier off-road terrain, flying through the runnable forest in these shoes. It's very happy on tarmac as well. It ate up my road commuter miles to the trail in as much comfort and with as much energy as many of the road shoes that I've tested recently. That says a lot about the Pima midsole. If you're planning to race an ultra where you jump from trail to road a lot, this shoe will cope brilliantly with that. On the steep descents into Chamonix, I personally felt that bouncy midsole left me a little bit out of control. More gifted trail runners might not struggle as much with that big energetic ride, but I found I had to focus a lot more on work to control this shoe a bit more than I would have liked. The built-in gaiters also strike me as a potential win if you're planning to head to desert ultras like the Marathon des Sables. Those slipping badly blistered feet back into the shoes each day might not be ideal, but that protection you're going to get from the sand would be a big thumbs up. The only other thing I'd point out here, there's not much by way of toe box protection, so if you're running on toe stubbing territory sort of terrain, that might be a concern. I do also wonder if these uppers will hold their shape over the long haul. I've not had any trouble so far, but the lack of structure does make me wonder how they'll fare longer term.
I've run about 60k in the Hoka Tecton X3, and most of that's been done on the Pentland Hills near Edinburgh, which is a nice little set of hills. You can do quite a lot of elevation there without necessarily going too high overall. It's not like it's mountains or anything, but there's lots of nice ups and downs there. There's a good variety of trails there as well, so there's a lot of grass and mud and hard-packed dirt, and there's some stony bits as well. Done a little bit on the road. I've also run with the shoes in my local forest here in London, which is much tamer trails, but some rooty bits, some muddy bits, that kind of thing. But so I have done a variety of trails in the shoe, but I haven't spent loads and loads of times on things like rock and that kind of thing, which obviously a lot of people will be running on, but that's just not really something I have a lot of access to. So first couple of runs in the shoe, I did actually rack up a fair bit of elevation because I did a hill rep session just going up and down one hill, and then I did my long run in the Pentlands, which was about 24k I think, with over 1,000 meters of ups and downs. Like I say, mostly quite short, sharp ups and downs rather than any particularly long climbs or descents. But for me, primarily a road runner, generally training for marathons, that's a lot of elevation, and certainly the big thing that came away from those couple of days in the shoe was how comfortable and protective it is. Like, I have done that kind of run in the Pentlands before, and nearly always my legs are shredded for a few days because, like I say, I'm not really used to doing that amount of descending in particular. But actually, I had none of that kind of muscle fatigue in the days after those runs with the Tecton X3, because it feels like the midsole is really absorbing the impact of downhill running really well in particular. And yeah, I felt pretty fresh after that actually, and having done like half the elevation of that run in the Speed Goat a couple of weeks earlier, and really had a lot of muscle fatigue afterwards, it was quite notable to me how much that stood out with with this shoe. In general, the midsole does feel really nice. I really like Hoka's Piba foam that they use in shoes like the Cielo and Rocket road racing shoes and the Mach X road shoe, and I think it's been brought to a trail shoe very successfully here in the Tecton X3 because you are feeling that softness, that bounce, that spring. You are getting the real deal feeling underfoot. Like sometimes when brands put their kind of road super foams in trail shoes, they tame them down so much it doesn't feel quite as good, but it does feel really good in the Hoka Tecton X3, but it also doesn't feel so out of hand as to be incredibly worrying on the trails. Like, it's not the most stable shoe, but it delivers a lot of spring while feeling pretty stable and reliable on most trails I was on, actually. I'd say, like, I did have some moments in the shoe, especially when I was tired at the end of runs, coming down hills. Like I say, I'm not the best descender in the world. It's not something I do a lot of, and I was some quite steep stuff on grass or little rocky bits, and I take them fairly slowly in a shoe like this. It's a bit wobbly. I'll be a bit worried. Probably more experienced trail runners would be pretty happy to hair up and down mountains in this shoe, but it definitely feels a little bit less kind of stable and secure than the previous models of the shoe, like the Tecton X2, which I think were very grounded and reliable for that kind of running. But I think you're getting a massive upgrade in the ride with the Tecton X3 because of that Piba midsole. There is a small sacrifice of stability and that kind of thing, but for the most part it's pretty manageable, and you do get that really nice bouncy feeling as a result. You certainly notice that if you hit some road sections or anything like that, or really runnable trails. Like, I've had bits of road in all my runs in the shoe, kind of to and from the trails or in the middle of the trails, and you can pick up the pace really nicely in it because it has got that bouncy feeling. And although the outsole does feel better on trails and softer ground, like, it doesn't feel too skittery or anything like that when you are on roads. I think the one extended stretch I didn't get on the shoe as well was probably on like a camber, where I was just running on a slight angle the whole time, and then it does just feel like it's pulling you over a little bit more than other trail shoes that have a wider base with a harder foam. It was one section of a run, and again, I was on tired legs then the day after I went out on a very kind of rutted and cambered run that was mostly in fields, and it didn't bother me so much because I felt a bit fresher. But if you're eyeing up this shoe for something like ultra marathons, I think on tired legs you just have to be a bit more careful about running in it. But at the same time, you're getting such a benefit from that midsole. It's a trade-off that a lot of people would be prepared to make. Grip's been really good on a variety of different trails, like a lot of soft ground running, like I say, and kind of muddy running. I've done some very steep, like fell style descents in the shoe, and although I wasn't going very fast, I think I had no problems or concerns about grip with the shoe at all. The same when I came across kind of wet rocks and wet roots, things that can be quite slippery. I've had reliable grip from the shoe and not really had any moments where I've thought, oh, I've just slipped a bit there. It's felt really good underfoot. So all round, a really enjoyable experience running in the Hoka.
So in terms of my testing time with the Tecton X3, now aside from the couple of runs that I have done out in Chamonix for the launch of the shoe, I've done plenty of running on my local trails. Now, I have done ultra runs before. I've done kind of 50k and 100k races. It's been a while since I've done those, but typically when I'm going out on the trails now, I'm probably maxing out at a couple of hours in terms of that kind of distance and kind of time on my feet. So in terms of my testing time, that was where I kind of maxed out. So I'm really coming in from it from that perspective, not the kind of ultra kind of endurance level, but I would say kind of, the kind of probably the typical trail runner that is probably kind of pushing it to a few hours of running. Now, I use them on my local trails. So there's a kind of Vanguard Way, which is kind of down in South London, and kind of has some, quite straight elements, but obviously uneven surfaces. There's some kind of woods to go through and navigate, mixture of terrain and surfaces as well, some mud, both soft and kind of, where there's been some rain, and obviously a little bit harder because it has been generally dry, some kind of uprooted branches, kind of rockier terrain as well, some elevation and some nice kind of downhill bits, kind of pick the pace up and see how it handles that as well. I think the first thing that stood out for me is I still got that really enjoyable bounce from this shoe. It is nice and lively, and I've loved it where I've had some kind of straighter elements and I've been able to really kind of pick the pace up in and run a little bit more up tempo in the shoe. And while it has got up a little bit in weight from the Tecton X2, it still does allow you to pick up the pace really nicely in this shoe. I think the big thing for me I wanted to see is when I started to tire, and that longer run, the most recent longer run I did, and I did start to tire, was starting to having to climb a little bit more, kind of, think a little bit more about my footing. It did feel a little bit wobbly, and I was having to be a bit more wary about how I was stepping in this shoe. And I typically would run in something like the Speedgoat or the Ultra Flyer, which I think slightly different shoes, but definitely give you a little bit more shoe, a little bit more in terms of the upper, in terms of that support and structure, but still give you something that's very protective in terms of that cushioning. Maybe isn't as lively as what you get here on the Tecton X3, but definitely does offer a bit more of a kind of an all-round package where, I think ultimately this definitely feels the faster of that, those shoes that I've kind of described and the shoes that I typically go for. And the outsole, fantastic. I love the outsole in here. Obviously, the lugs have grown a little bit in terms of the Tecton X2. I still have found that, I've been able to run a little bit on road and pavements where I have been on kind of going out in this shoe. But ultimately, I think slightly firmer, kind of muddier ground is quite nice. I think I found, I think, you know, it has been able to handle kind of softer kind of, you know, mud as well too. And I think it does, you know, it's well equipped to handle a mixture of kind of surfaces. So from the outside point of view, I don't have really kind of any question marks from that point of view. But I think, yeah, I've enjoyed running when I've had some nice kind of parts of my route to kind of, you know, kind of tackle. It can handle that kind of uphill kind of climb pretty well as well too, and those kind of downhills. But it's where I think I've got a little bit kind of tired. My legs have struggled to keep that kind of form and technique, and it's been a little bit more of a challenge to run in this shoe. But ultimately, overall, I've really enjoyed running in the Tecton X3. Those are really kind of the things. I think there's some good things, definitely some things to be wary of about this shoe, but ultimately, overall, the experience has been very good and ultimately enjoyable.
Verdict then, and when I first saw the details of the Hoka Tecton X3, I thought Hoka potentially messed up this shoe. The built-in gaiter seemed quite an extreme change, and like it might only play nice with certain feet. In reality, I think Hoka has transformed the Tecton, and it's now a markedly better shoe for running a certain type of trail. Luckily, this shoe fits the regular trails that I run perfectly, the kind of off-road where you want agility, grip, protection and security, but you're able to move with freedom. Nothing too steep and nothing too technical. If you want shoes that will help you attack runnable trail with a fun, lively and energetic ride, these definitely deliver. It's a great deal punchier than the previous Tectons. The roomy fit is also an improvement in my opinion. I feel more like gifted descenders might be able to control the shoe better and get more out of it. On trickier terrain, regular runners might be better off sticking to the more reliable, stable Speedgoat 6 if they're taking on anything particularly technical and gnarly.
So verdict, I think the Hoka Tecton X3 does a really good job of bringing a super shoe experience to the trails. Like, Hoka has thrown caution to the wind a little bit. It's a bouncy shoe. It's got quite a soft midsole foam. It's not really wide either, to try and counter that, like Nike did with the Ultrafly when they put Zoom X foam in that. Had a really wide base to counter the instability of the foam. You are getting a really nice feeling underfoot. It's very protective. It really looks after the legs well when you're descending, and you get a lot of bounce, and you can run pretty fast in the shoe when you have the sections on your runs where you can run fast. At the same time, you can kick right back in the shoe and, you know, even hike or run very slowly on the sections where you have to do that. Like, I did a lot of uphill climbing in the shoe where I was just, you know, walking and that kind of thing because it got steep enough, and it felt good for that as well. As I said in the run test, there are some stability worries to have with the shoe, but I think if you are a more experienced trail runner than me, or a very experienced trail runner in general, I think you'll be able to manage them and enjoy the benefits of the shoe without feeling too concerned about the squirrely feeling underfoot you get sometimes from that soft foam. But it might be one to look out for a bit more if you are a bit more new to the trails, and that's where shoes like the Hoka Tecton X2 still have appeal because they are more grounded. You get a little bit of punch from the foams in there, but nothing like what you get with the Tecton X3, but you do get a more reliable, kind of stable shoe. It's also really expensive, so you've really got to have a purpose, I think, for picking up this shoe, because it is a shoe built for purpose. It's a, you know, it's a long distance racing shoe. It feels amazing. It works well for that, but you've got to know what you're doing and have races or events or runs that, you know, merit spending this much on the shoe, and be confident you're going to be able to use it for them. So I do think it steers towards, you know, experienced trail runners all round. But if you are going to spend the money, you are going to get something special for that money. Sometimes, you know, you see super trail shoes and they put a big price tag out there, but the shoe doesn't really deliver an experience that, you know, feels different to a much cheaper shoe. This does. Like, it feels like a big upgrade on something like the Hoka Speedgoat 6, which is an amazing trail shoe. That's probably the kind of trail shoe I would buy, as somebody focuses more on the roads but just wants a trail shoe to do a bit of everything. This does give you an elevated experience in terms of the bounce and the kind of protection and just fun you get from it all round. I think the only trail shoe I've really experienced the same kind of level of that super shoe feeling would be the Adidas Terex Agravic Speed Ultra, which I think is even more kind of concerning underfoot in terms of stability, with its very pronounced rocker, very narrow heel. Like, that's also not quite as good an outsole, I think, as the one on the Hoka. It feels a bit geared towards harder surfaces, maybe shorter events for lots of people, more runnable trails. I think this can handle really a bit more of a wide range of trails well. That does have a bit more stability and a ground feel for longer events, but they're both really good shoes, very fast shoes with, you know, serious road racing foams in the midsole that then deliver that kind of benefit to the trails. I think the Hoka is probably the one I would prefer out of those two, because I do think it's a little bit more accessible, but the Adidas is a bit cheaper and it is an exceptional shoe. I used it for the first 30 miles of a 50-mile ultra last year and I really enjoyed it. That was on very tame, runnable trails, and, you know, I was very happy in the shoe on that. I'd probably look more at the Tecton X3 when I was going on to something a bit sketchier though. It's also the Nike Ultrafly, which is heavier, certainly not as propulsive or as fun feeling as the Hoka, I would say. Like, Nike did widen the base quite a lot, but I think it is probably a more accessible trail shoe as a result. I also use that for I did a 50k in it, and then the last 30k of that 80k Ultra last year as well. And it is a very comfortable, supportive shoe, the Ultrafly. It just doesn't really feel quite as lively and dynamic as the Hoka or the Adidas trail shoes. Even though it has that Zoom X foam in there, the whole package has been tamed down a little bit, whereas I think Hoka and Adidas made fewer concessions to that and made slightly less stable shoes that have a bit more kind of verve and excitement on the trails. We're about to also start testing the Asics Metafuji Trail, which should be a good shoe. Also tested the New Balance's Super Trail shoe and the one from Saucony and a few others, and I think the Hoka does beat them all for performance. I think it's up there with the Adidas in particular, but you're going to have to pay a lot for it, whereas something like the Saucony Endorphin Edge is available for a lot less in sales at the moment. It's a firmer riding shoe. It might not be one that people would enjoy so much, I think, for long distances, but it is another very impressive shoe.
So my verdict on the Hoka Tecton X3, and I'm really coming at this from a perspective of a trail runner that, you know, has done ultras in the past, hasn't done them for a long time. And when I'm going out in the trails, I'm typically not going to hit ultra distances. Now, despite that, I've still really enjoyed running in the Tecton X3. And I think if you like the idea of a trail shoe that is bouncy, that is lively, that has a great outsole on it, and gives you that kind of feel of a kind of, you know, road running kind of carbon racing shoe, then absolutely you get that in this shoe. And I don't think you have to be a seasoned kind of trail runner to kind of really enjoy that feeling you get from the Tecton X3. What I would say is that I think if you are, you know, running longer in this shoe, you know, running at that ultra distance, I think if you are, you know, running across more technical terrain, you're trying to maintain that quicker pace over those kind of longer distances and more challenging kind of routes, I think, you know, you're going to find you're going to get on more in terms of the, you know, slight instability. You're going to see elements of the design of this shoe. I think if you are, you know, a bit more of a beginner trail runner, it might be a bit more challenging. And ultimately, I think when you start to tire, there are some kind of things that make it a little bit more difficult, or a little bit more challenging than some other Hoka shoes kind of, you know, running. I think ultimately it is, you know, not the most accessible trail running shoe in Hoka's range, and that's something to keep in mind here. It's obviously very expensive, and I think if you are looking for those gains over those longer distances, over those more challenging kind of environments, then I think you are going to get a really good shoe here, and if you know, you can make this work for you. I think ultimately, you know, when I look at the other trail shoes that I've kind of liked over those longer distances that maybe slightly in this category, I think, you know, I really enjoyed running in the Nike Ultrafly, which for me isn't the same fast, quick kind of feeling shoe with a kind of, you know, a midsole foam that is, you know, more renowned in kind of road running shoes. That's a more comfortable long distance shoe. It doesn't have that same kind of pep as the Tecton X3, but ultimately that's a very nice shoe if you just want something that's very comfortable and does give you that kind of road running shoe kind of feel underfoot. And a really good outsole on that as well too, but ultimately that's still a very expensive shoe as well. But ultimately, yeah, I've really enjoyed running the Tecton X3. I think a lot of people enjoy running in this shoe. I think ultimately, if you are going to go planning to run longer in it, and I think you have got a very good kind of technique in terms of those kind of, you know, hitting those trails that are a little bit more kind of challenging, then I think you will get on with this shoe and get the most out of it ultimately. So yeah, Tecton X3, really enjoyed it. Very bouncy, lively trail shoe that I think a lot of people are going to like. But I think there's going to be certain runners that are definitely going to get the most out of this shoe. Okay, so there you have it. That is our take on a pretty pricey but enjoyable Hoka Tecton X3. Now, if you've got any questions about this shoe or you want to see it compared to any other shoes that we haven't mentioned in this video, do let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos. And yeah, let's see you for the next Run Testers video.